All right. Well, good morning and welcome to the Future of Conscious Capitalism post-COVID with CCI CEO Alexander McCobin and CCI Board Director, CEO and Chairman, Improving Holdings LLC, Curtis Hite. There's a lot of acronyms already this morning, sorry. My name is Tammy Temple. I am the CCSD Chapter Director. I will put my email in chat at some point during the presentation, so please feel welcome to contact me with questions about future events, about the chapter, possibly participating as a sponsor, a volunteer, submitting a donation. I'm here to help you all and am happy to answer any questions. Speaking of chat, we are going to have a Q&A as part of this presentation today. So as Curtis and Alexander move through the session, again, feel welcome to add a comment, a question in chat, and we'll be sure to walk through all of that information at the conclusion of their presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to Del Lewis. He's the CCSD board president, and he'll share with you a little update on the chapter. Del, take it away. All right.
Thanks, Tammy.
Sure.
Welcome, everyone. I know it's April, but in many ways, I consider this sort of this event the start of our year, our new year. And I couldn't be more excited about what lays ahead. You know, as we travel further into 2021 and we begin to spend more time face-to-face with each other, I just want you to know that as the co-chair of this organization and as your president, we are reorganized and we are re-energized to create the space where, you know, each of us can learn, practice, grow, and share the core concepts of conscious capitalism. You know, concepts like higher purpose, inspired leadership, and conscious collaboration with all of our stakeholders. And, you know, the faster that we can spread these beliefs and these practices throughout our community, the greater collective impact that we're going to make. And that collective impact is going to ride, that tide is going to lift all of our boats. So that's why I'm so excited to see so many people on the call today. As we have this kickoff event, even though it is only April. So once again, welcome. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair and the chair of our steering committee, Michael Harth, who will introduce our distinguished speakers. So please take it away, Michael.
All right, thanks, Del. Thanks, Tammy. I'm just super excited to see so many people involved today. It's a lot of fun and it's very energizing to see the San Diego chapter get connected with one another. We've got a great group of people. I want to thank those of you who I've met with recently and spent time with. You guys have really come together and supported us. And so without the financial support and the volunteerism and everybody getting involved, we wouldn't be able to pull this together. I've been involved with Conscious Capitalism for about 4 or 5 years now. I met Alexander McCobin, our first speaker. I think we met in Boston, actually, and he was first pitching CCI to Laz Parking. And I didn't know a lot about Alexander, excuse me, I didn't know a lot about CCI, but over the years, I've gotten to know Alexander. He's been a wonderful leader for this organization. It's been fun to watch you grow, Alexander. He's got a background in philosophy, but got drawn into business because he was excited about the CCI mission and how we can elevate humanity through business together. And Alexander, we're excited to hear about your thoughts and where we're going post-COVID, and take it away for us.
Michael, Del, Tammy, thank you so much for organizing this, and to everyone for joining us on an early start from the West Coast for everyone on a Thursday. It really is a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to introduce the other speaker today, Curtis Hite, who we're going to have a conversation with, one of our board members and just an incredible conscious capitalist himself. But before I do that, I want to take a quick moment to look back at the history of conscious capitalism, because in order to understand our future and where we're going, it's important to recognize where we've come from and just how far things really have come. Because these ideas have been around since capitalism was developed. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher before he was an economist, but it wasn't until the mid-2000s that the term conscious capitalism first started to be used by business leaders like John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, and Kip Tindall, the CEO of the Container Store, and others, who started to informally meet with one another, and especially so after the 2008 financial crisis, seek to articulate a different way of thinking about business and capitalism than what most people understood at that time. Because rather than saying that the purpose of business is to maximize profit for shareholders, these were business leaders who were running successful businesses on the principle that profit is good, but it's a means to serve a higher purpose. It's to make the world a better place and to take care of all of a company's stakeholders. And so through many informal and formal meetings over the years, a book was developed, Conscious Capitalism, to articulate the philosophy, and published in 2013. And the first public conference was organized, and Conscious Capitalism Inc. was founded to spread this philosophy. And at that time, the real purpose of the organization and the need for the movement was to persuade people that this is just a better way of thinking about business and capitalism that's more reflective of what it really means. But especially over the last year and over the last 10 years as we've been doing this work, things have dramatically changed. When COVID first hit, the Financial Times ran an article saying that this was an acid test for conscious capitalism. For all of those companies that were talking about higher purpose and stakeholder orientation and making changes in this direction, were they going to stick to those principles, or were they going to jettison them at the first sign of trouble? And what we've seen at Conscious Capitalism, and what Alan Murray, the editor-in-chief of Fortune, has been documenting over the past year, is that not only have companies who are running on these principles before sticking to them over the past year and the challenges that we've all faced, but more companies have come to these principles as a result of what we've all gone through. They are now recognizing that conscious capitalism and these principles are the future, and are looking for support in implementing them now, and guidance in how to make this sticky so it's not a flash in the pan, but a significant change going forward, so that conscious capitalism becomes redundant. It's just the norm in the future. And we've made so much progress as an organization and movement over that time, and that's because business leaders that have been driving this organization and movement have been making their own changes over that period. And that's why I'm excited to introduce Curtis Hite now to all of you and have a conversation with him about conscious capitalism, because Curtis is just a model conscious capitalist himself. He's the CEO and chairman of Improving Holdings, a graduate of Texas A&M University in 1994, and one of several leaders who started the Blue Ocean Group, which acquired a small training company called Improving back in 2007 to kick off what he's been working on since then. And over the years, Improving has grown into a tremendous company that's been recognized by the Inc. 505,000 as one of the fastest growing private companies in the US for 9 consecutive years. It's received over 30 recognitions as a best place to work in the US by Inc. magazine, Columbus Business First, Texas Monthly, and the Minneapolis Business Journal. And Curtis has been growing his business on conscious capitalist principles over that time period, and is one of the biggest advocates of conscious capitalism that I know. Curtis, thank you so much for taking the time to join this call today with the San Diego chapter and to share your wisdom with everyone. I would actually love it if you would kick this off by going a little more in depth into your personal journey as a conscious capitalist to get to where you are today.
All right. Well, thank you, Alexander. I don't know, Alexander introduces me occasionally, and each time something mentions gets embellished or added or something like that, which is flattering, but I'm humbled and appreciate that. I will start that back in 2009, I got invited. This was the very early stages of the formation of the Conscious Capitalism organization and movement, I think maybe 3 or 4 years in. And one of my friends invited me to the CEO Summit in Austin. And I was very excited about going to this group and meeting leaders, but I really didn't know what I was getting into. And after I showed up in Austin and my friend welcomed me, it was one of the best and most impactful events of my life. And I'm not just saying that, it's because it introduced me to a lot of like-minded leaders. And that this is exactly why Greg Massey, who is also on the board, I believe invited me to this group. Like many people that are in our situations, sometimes we don't know that there are others out there that are thinking the same things we think, or that hold similar values, aspire to similar things. And this was that introduction to a group. And I really felt at that moment I wasn't alone. And it also started the journey that, let's say, to where I am today. I am on the international board, but I'm also in a CEO group here in Dallas, Texas, that is of all conscious capitalism. This was actually initiated by CCI, and today I meet with these 10 CEOs of various organizations. I think the smallest, maybe 4 or 5 million in revenues. The biggest is a $10 billion organization. And we share our values, we share our experiences, our challenges, all in this moment, a movement. And so it was back then in 2009 that I got introduced. I found what some people would call a tribe that I didn't know existed. And I was very happy that they welcomed me in.
Curtis, you're already touching on some really important points here. And I actually want to start with the peer groups that you're talking about and how you utilize them to go on your own conscious capitalist journey. Because one of the things that we've learned over the years is that this journey isn't something to walk alone. Having others to support you in the process, people who have gone on the conscious capitalist journey before and can be models to follow, are absolutely critical. So how is it that going to the CEO Summit and then developing the CEO group helped you on your journey?
In numerous ways. I'll at the CEO Summit, which I'm very excited. If you haven't been, it's back in person, I think, this year in October. I would highly recommend you go to that if you have not been and you're a president or CEO. A great networking event. But what it really does is give me an opportunity to refine many of the ideas that were already in place at improving. And when at that CEO Summit, I mentioned it was just the beginning. I've also been to the majority of the spring events that Conscious Capitalism puts on as well, which have grown. I think the one in Dallas was close to 1,000 people, and the community keeps on growing in this. And to learn and hear the stories whenever that we have 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 10 people get together, and being open to ideas. I think this group is a very open group in general. They want to learn, they want to take ideas from others, maybe add a little bit. So each of these interactions, the CEO Summit, the conference, the spring conferences where it's both learning and networking event. Now the CEO forum is what we call it. All is a pattern. It's about getting together and sharing experiences. And when we share those experiences in a facilitated way, it actually starts to really sink in, whether it's this call. And I want to encourage people right now, you can ask questions whenever Alexander or myself might make a comment, ask the question, interact, because that is how we actually start developing this. And the last thing I'll say about that is the facilitated, usually when we're focusing on one of the pillars, the CEO group, we take every quarter, we're getting together and we focus on one of these pillars of conscious capitalism, whether it's conscious leadership, whether it's purpose beyond just making profit that you heard Alexander talk about, or culture, or the stakeholder models that we have. We actually focus on the challenges, are vulnerable with one another, real, so that we can actually make progress, not only for our own businesses, but for the movement in general.
Now, Curtis, 2020 was a pivotal year for everyone, and conscious capitalist companies were impacted like every other business out there. And I would love it if you would share with everyone here what it was like for you and your company going through 2020, what you had to do, and how conscious capitalism helped, if anything, to get through that period.
So like many businesses, I mean, the COVID pandemic affected businesses in many different ways. Improving as a professional services company focused in the technology sector, we develop software systems for other companies. And our two biggest verticals, or two of our top three verticals, were energy and travel and transportation. And if you've been in touch with anything, which everybody is, you know that these two verticals really were hit either hard by cyclical events or by the pandemic itself. And improving as a result actually took a tremendous hit. Almost overnight, 40% of our revenues evaporated because of our ties to these organizations. And the very first thing I can remember doing as we were doing this, we anticipated, we had our first meeting towards the end of February, which was before the shutdowns. And I mentioned things are about to change. And as we go into this environment, we spent 2 hours as an executive group, every director or above inside the company, and we're 1,100 people, so there are quite a few, are on a call like this. And we go over our guiding principles for 2 hours. And the point there I'm saying is culture is not just, a lot of people hear about a culture and it's all about creating this best place to work or a fun place to work. Yes, that is absolutely part of it. But the reality is our culture is about leaning into these guiding principles and leaning into things like dedication, thinking of others a little more without thinking less of yourself. About involvement is our second one, and that is that our success has always been and will always be a consequence of our collective involvement, not just me, not just a few executives, but our collective involvement. And finally, this commitment to excellence, that whether it's in good times or bad times, that excellence is not some occasional act. Whatever is thrown at to us, it has to be a consistent habit. And then overarching our aspirational goal of we build environments of trust with all of our stakeholders. And this is what we talked about, those 4 things for 2 hours, because that was laying the foundation of how we're going to handle the event. And with 40% of our revenues going, there was no choice, honestly, except for us to accept a path of layoffs. We were not eligible for PPP like many companies. And the reason we were not eligible for PPP is because many people don't realize this, but we had a private equity stake that exceeded a limit that at that point made us ineligible. So there was no, okay, I get to pay employees no matter what happens. And that first principle about a purpose beyond making profit, we all have to understand that doesn't mean that there's going to be no layoffs. It doesn't mean that we sometimes don't have to make hard decisions. It's beyond making profit. Profit is the air that businesses breathe. Profit is what is necessary actually for us to live into the principles of conscious capitalism. And so we went through that. Now we went to the bare minimum that we could. We leaned into our guiding principles as we were making very tough decisions, and we were very transparent with our employees. Town halls every 2 weeks in front of 800 people at a time, and that is really what got us through this very, very hard time. 3 months later, after our 2 worst business months in company history, we actually had our 2 best months in company history when it came to new business development and new clients. We were seeing a shift in markets. But I'm going to summarize again, it's leaning into the culture aspects and the conscious leadership pillars that got us through to where we are today. And it's still a very volatile environment for us. Yet we've managed to return to growth, recover a majority of the way, but not all yet. And we're on a stronger path because we've been through this together.
Curtis, I really appreciate you contextualizing the really tough decision to have to make layoffs, even within the conscious capitalism framework, because it can sometimes be easy to fall into simple claims about what conscious capitalism means, that it's never doing X, never doing Y. And as you're pointing out, it's about the values a company has to make really difficult decisions, not that it never has to make difficult decisions. And I'm wondering if there's anything else that you want to share as to what you think are common misunderstandings of conscious capitalism that you like to point out to people and is important for building the movement going forward.
So sure, there are a few. One of the misconceptions that I already lightly touched upon was that it's purpose before profit, or purpose at all expenses. Even we're not going to have sustainable businesses, sustainable contributions to the other stakeholders if we can't have profit. So people have to understand that these things go hand in hand. I have a story about that. There is a company that is in Dallas, Texas. They were actually struggling going into the pandemic, and they had great ambition for purpose. They really did. But they didn't have the profitability to lean into some of these higher level initiatives, even with their own, one of the most important stakeholders, which is their employees as a services business. Well, the pandemic actually launched their business, and launching their business, they tripled. They were then able to experience a level of profitability that they had never had before. And I think they've almost now become iconic in the sense that living into their purpose and helping their employees, it was enabled by the profit. So what I'm going to say is, one of the myths is that profit is bad. We hear that. And profit is not bad. Profit is the enabling force behind conscious businesses. A second thing that I think a little bit is a myth is that when people hear conscious capitalism, they apply their understanding of the word conscious and they apply it to what they believe that means. And most often that's going to be a social. Oh, this means they are for the social good. The challenge with that is a lot of ways to define social good. And I bet you if I asked the people on this call, we'd have, I don't know, 35 different answers, 40 different answers to what that means. Conscious capitalism is about a purpose that is beyond that profit, a mission beyond just making money. But that mission can be social good, but it also could be environmental good. It also could be the welfare, the mental health of employees. It could also be an industry purpose like ours is actually driven by changing some of the perceptions that the IT professionals have. And our is an industry purpose. So that other is, there are all shapes and sizes. What we do of conscious businesses, it's not just social, it can be a wide variety. But our common principle is we all believe that capitalism is one of the greatest forces of good, despite the few, and they are few, bad examples. There are enough that they get elevated. But despite that, capitalism might be the greatest force of good that's ever happened in our lifetimes.
Thank you, Curtis. And the last question I have, and I want to invite everyone to ask us questions. I can't see the chat box, so Michael or Dell, wonder if one of you might be able to call out questions as we transition to that. But Curtis, as you look to 2021 and as we get to the other side of this pandemic, you use conscious capitalist principles to get through the tough times. What do you see as the opportunities as a conscious capitalist business as we get to the other side of this now, and what you see is what's coming up going forward?
honestly, I don't see it too differently before or after this pandemic. From within the company, lean into our guiding principles. Just had a president meeting, and how improving's organized. We have 10 presidents across our 14 offices, and we gathered everybody together. And of course, what did we start with was our guiding principles, the things that we stand for, the things that we aspire to, and let those guide each and everything that we do. If you didn't notice, these things roll off my tongue. And that's the same thing with all of our leaders, because they are so pervasive. We revisit these weekly, actually, in some stand-up, sometimes daily, and lean into those. And if you're not already leaning in, know who you are as well. The other lesson, and it's not necessarily a lesson, but it's an awareness. And when I hear conscious leadership, a lot of people, right, will again interpret their version of what conscious leadership means. To me, the conscious leader is aware and mindful and deeply empathetic, things that will lead to trust. And that is something that we can be very mindful and aware of, no matter what political affiliation you're with. We are still in uncertain times. And as we look to the future and we look to 2021, there's a great divide across our country. And I am saying nothing that nobody doesn't already know. And being mindful that there are opinions that don't match your own. It's almost 50-50, which is ironic because the center, the true center, is very small right now. Be mindful, and that the fears of one side might not be the same as the fears of another, but they are both fears and they are both real. And I do believe that we have very, very common goals. So in a year that had health uncertainty, in the year that had financial markets collapse and rebound, in the year that had a presidential election that is very divided, in the year that we had such social unrest, we as mindful leaders can serve everybody if we keep our minds open. And that's what I try to remind all of our leaders, is that be aware there are opinions and fears and concerns that don't match your own, and be empathetic towards them, even if you don't agree.
Curtis, thank you. And what I really appreciate that you shared is that so much of what's going to come is what you and other conscious capitalists have been doing for a long time. From my vantage point, looking at the whole conscious capitalism movement, what's really exciting is that we're seeing new businesses coming to these principles and ideas for the first time as well. So for them, it's going to be a different world. They're looking for help in how to implement these principles in their company for the first time, now that they know this is what the future of business is. And they're looking for others who have done this for a long time to be guides for them. They're looking for their peers, for other CEOs, for other C-suite positions in different functional areas, to explain what you've been doing already in order to help them make their own changes and adopt these. So that peer-to-peer support that we started this conversation with is going to be even more important in 2021 and beyond, in order to keep growing this movement and help more companies really be conscious capitalists, not just talk about these principles because they're the flavor of the year, but rather really this is the future of what business means and how people understand it. And that's why I'm really excited for the San Diego chapter and Conscious Capitalism Inc. to be working more closely together, for us to support business leaders in the San Diego area who are already practicing conscious capitalism, meet each other and support each other, and connect with other business leaders that are just coming around to these ideas in San Diego, and connect them with others in the area and in the rest of the global conscious capitalism community, both in person at events like the CEO Summit and virtually with our new opportunities like the Senior Leader Network that was created last year. And so as we turn it over to questions, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's on this call for the work that you're doing. in building the conscious capitalism movement in San Diego and using your business and work to elevate humanity.
Thank you both. That was fantastic. And Tammy, if you could help us in moderating the questions in the chat, that would be great. And as we start that, I see we've got a couple in already. I would just ask and encourage each and every one of you on the call to think about what you heard from Alexander and Curtis as it relates to you and as it relates to how you relate to capitalism. Curtis, I think I'm thinking that you would agree with me that conscious capital, it takes all of us to be consciously capitalistic, right? So it's not just for the CEO, the business owner, or the founder, right? And that's really what we mean by that whole stakeholder orientation and stakeholder collaboration. So anybody that's on the call today, think about how it relates to you and think about what you heard. And then I would just also encourage you to use Curtis as your guide and mentor here today. And if you're thinking about something that's in your mind as it relates to conscious capitalism and you'd like to get a little further clarification on it, bring it up. Ask Curtis. See how he would answer that question, and then take that as part of your arsenal and put that into your toolkit. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to moderate the questions, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Del. Thank you, Alexander and Curtis. For those of you that might not be aware of how chat works, if you look on the bottom of your toolbar, you'll see security, participants, reactions. There are also 3 little dots that say more. So if you don't see a chat icon, you can click on more, and then you'll have an opportunity to click on the word chat. And in the margin, you'll be able to type out your question. So we do have a question for Curtis. This is from Linda Lattimore, and she would like to know if you consider yourself an activist CEO. Business Roundtable has really brought that to the surface, as has Larry Fink at BlackRock. So Curtis, are you an activist CEO?
Well, like many words or terms, there's going to be a lot of definitions to what that means. And in many ways, I do consider myself in that regard, not out of that I am doing great things or that impacting, the world in some tremendous way. But I do believe that I am impacting those that are around me and our stakeholders in very, very positive ways. And I think that the trickle effects of people, no matter where they are, if you are in a leadership position, and by the way, everybody here is in a leadership position directly or indirectly, if you don't realize that we have a chance to actually move people and organizations in a very positive way. And in that regard, I fundamentally believe I am. I believe in the purpose of conscious capitalism. I believe that business is a force of good. Like I said, I don't believe that profitability is an evil. I believe that when we get enough people and we get enough mass, that we are moving this entire needle, that businesses will be thought of a different way, that, as Alexander mentioned, we will be commonplace. Conscious capitalism will just be, of course, that's what capitalism is. And I believe we will get there one day, just like everything else, just like every movement in history with the industrial revolutions and Renaissance and things. The pendulum always swings one way, but then the best things about those particular eras always seem to become the foundation, and we build upon them. And so I hope that some consider me a very positive activist. I try to influence people in very open and positive ways. And from a personal purpose, I think there's too much sadness in this world. And if I were really to think about myself, almost a majority of my own actions are trying to alleviate pain and just allow more joy to be in the world in general.
Nicely said. We have a question from a local San Diegan. Inga would like to know, and I would direct this to the both of you, if you have any examples of conscious capitalist CEOs post-COVID that are doing an exemplary job that you would hold up as an example, whether it's locally, which might be hard for you guys about San Diego, but globally as well.
Okay,
Chris, you wanna start?
yes, I could list a number of them. One of my mentors and friends, Greg Massey, First United Bank, right? But I'm going to say he was an exemplar prior to COVID and after COVID, because these are not things that are necessarily changing, because this is who he was. And if you look at what he is doing in the communities and the groups that he's involved with, take a look at First United Bank. And I actually believe in the next week or two, they are going to be launching a community-based, for smaller communities based product that's very similar to Facebook, but that is targeted on connecting groups in these smaller communities. Even though he's a $10 billion bank, he's headquartered out of Durant, Oklahoma. He's spreading into North Texas, and his influence is great. And he leads his organization with principles that are the organizations, and they stick with them. So that's a great example. If you want to look out there, they are doing tremendous things.
And I'll add a CEO from a very different industry. Another one of our board members, Brian Schultz, with Studio Movie Grill. Now, Studio Movie Grill is in the movie theater business and is in the restaurant business. It's a place where you can get dinner while you watch your movie. Two of the industries that were hit hardest by COVID. And as challenging as last year was, the way that he led through it, being incredibly open and vulnerable and honest with his employees about their situation, helped them really figure out a new strategy to go forward. And it doesn't mean that it was sunshine and rainbows. He had to file for bankruptcy. Studio Movie Grill has to reorganize in order to get to the other side of this. But Brian maintained an optimism and an energy that inspired his team as they went through this, and actually got their vendors and others who were involved in the bankruptcy process to speak out on Studio Movie Grill's behalf when they were going through the proceedings, because they support the company. They've built up such strong relationships that vendors who are about to not get paid were still supporting the company. And now that we're into 2021 and getting ready to come out of COVID, Brian is committed to having the same number of theaters in 2 years opened again and working in a safe way for Studio Movie Grill that he had before the pandemic began. And just watching what leaders in these different industries, some that have done well, some that were hurt terribly by the challenges of the past year, respond by really leaning into their conscious leadership and remembering the higher purpose of their business and taking care of all their stakeholders, really is an exemplary model for going through tough times and what leadership will look like, even more so when we get to the other side of this.
And that's a really good point, Alexander. Although we are referencing post-COVID, with all due respect to all businesses, I know that many businesses are still struggling and still consider themselves to be very much in the depths of COVID. So I do want to just make that statement, just to be respectful to all businesses and parties out there. We have a question from Jeff.
Can I just, go ahead, Michael, and then please.
I was just going to say, because you referred to some local companies, I want to put somebody on the spot because we have a CEO on today. Jackie, I'm going to put you on the spot here. But Jackie Reed is the CEO of TS Restaurants, and they have 4 restaurants in California and another 11 restaurants in Hawaii. And as you can imagine, those restaurants were majorly impacted and shut down for a period of time and had to adapt. But Jackie, maybe just locally, you could share for a moment, some of the things that you've had to go through and how you guys faced some of these challenges locally.
Oh, you did put me on the spot, Michael. Hi, everyone. March 1st of 2020, we had 2,047 people on payroll. We get to about 2,400 in the summertime. We had started our summer hiring. And a month later, we had 10 employees on payroll. Over 1,900 layoffs, over 100 furloughs, which, we're a 44-year-old family-owned company with a lot of tenure. So it was heartbreaking because these people are like my family, and in some cases actually are my family. My brother, my nieces, my nephews all work for the company throughout TS. So what the board, which Michael's on our board, the families, the boards, what we did was, we were in a critical state where, every restaurant company in America at that time didn't know, or around the world actually didn't know if we were going to make it. But instead of just focusing in on the financial pieces that were needed, we also used our mission and values as a guide. So even though we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, we knew the decisions that we had to make. And when we did the layoffs, I personally sent an email to each person. I didn't blast it. They got a personal email from me, all 2,000 people. Each person also got a phone call from their general manager to let them know what was happening and that we would remain in touch with them. We set up, through Michael's suggestion, actually, we set up Facebook groups to keep in touch with the people who had been laid off so they could continue to support each other. And we also continue to communicate with them as if we were still operating, even though, for a number of weeks we were completely shut down with zero revenue. So we just continued to try to take care of each other as much as we could, even though the financial rewards couldn't be there. We couldn't take care of them as far as making sure that they had a paycheck. We sent out all the resources that were available for food drives, for unemployment. We helped a number of people, probably about half of our employees apply for unemployment, and helped them figure out how to follow up. And then we just tried to be there for each other as emotional support through this really tough time. So, I could go on and on, but that's kind of the highlights. It was a rough year. It's been a rough time. But what that created was we tried to be as transparent as we could, and we tried to make sure that they knew that they were the most important thing, and that the most important thing wasn't profit, as you've been saying, Curtis. And I think that resonated and created even more unity throughout the company.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jackie. And there, in our community, there are a lot of organizations that are practicing these principles, and you can look for them. And Inga is a great question. And we often get that question about who are the conscious capitalist companies in our area, because we'd love to love to support them and love to do business with them. And that is wonderful. And I want that question to continue, and I want you to continue to search for them. And I want to add something else to that mix. I would encourage all of you to think about, how can I, as an individual, help businesses understand about conscious capitalism and make them either more consciously capitalistic or get them involved in this type of operating procedure. So it's not just, oh, I just only want to do business with those organizations that are consciously capital. That's fine. And what can I do? Who can I be? How can I show up with my own power to help them, other businesses, understand what they have before them? Because I think one of the things that I think has been alluded to here, and we don't often amplify it, but it's extremely important, is that, when John Mackey of Whole Foods sort of came up with this and started to bring people together, one of the things that he said was that he actually realized that when he applied these principles, even though he was not focusing on profit, his profit actually soared. So it's a win-win, good. And so I would just add to your comment and question, Inga, that let's think about how we as individuals, what is our power to help spread that message to get other companies to think that way.
Yeah, and Del, sorry if I could add something. While our employees were laid off on furlough, a number of them came in to volunteer, and we were able to donate over 5,000 meals during the time where we were closed to community centers, boys and girls clubs, local organizations, because people were really needed food at that time. You know, there were a lot of people with food insecurity, and so that's just the kind of rallying that people will do when they are treated well and they feel like they matter.
Yeah, so important. Thank you for bringing that up. So important.
So I actually want to jump in as well. Tammy, a little bit back to, I read that comment too about, we're actually still in COVID. And I want to say, we actually are still in COVID too. And one of the things about about conscious capitalism is having mindful leaders and conscious leaders. And I believe that I am using this term very loosely. And these are the types of things that I appreciate when brought up, and it's done respectfully. And when people don't assume that others have bad intent when they do that, things can be worked through. The nice thing about that is I doubt I'm going to make that mistake again. And if I do, well, maybe I'm called out, because we are absolutely still in a COVID environment. And what I really meant to say was past the complete shutdown, which in many regards, we were so many, even places like Texas were in complete shutdown, and it was just an odd experience. And now as we're coming out of that full blown and with offices in 14 different locations, I can tell you the country is responding and coming out of this in very different ways in different places. And I want to encourage everybody to be respectful of that and empathetic towards that as well. Minneapolis is probably, for us in the offices we operate out, very, very slow coming out of kind of the pandemic as well. And when I say coming out, the start of the come out. So be respectful of that. And when people call you out for maybe using some loose language, I apologize, own it. Let them know that it wasn't your intent. And whether it's in some social area or something like this, I think a lesson I always learned is that there's a tendency, if we're not careful, for us to judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intent. And we are much better served if we judge others assuming they had good intent as well. And so I so appreciated that. I love the talk straight. I loved that comment coming out. And I'm like, yes, that's the type of thing we should be doing. So whoever said that, and I had to put on my glasses just long enough to read that, I'm very appreciative that you made that comment. And that's going to have a positive impact on me, both today and going into the future.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Jackie. We do have a few more questions and comments. Jeff Blanton of Jailbreak Leadership and of CCSD Board Director fame. He loves the point about purpose being beyond just the social good idea. So Curtis, how did you arrive on the purpose for your company?
All right. Without going into too much details, there's that 2009 CEO conference, and I was intimidated. We were $9 million in revenue at the time, and I'm sitting next to one of the operating presidents of Starbucks, and Doug Rao, who at the time I believe was leading Trader Joe's, and I was like, wow, my eyes all big. And one of the keynote speakers at the very beginning got up and said that outside of sales professionals, IT professionals have the worst perception among CEOs. And there was a long story behind that. We call that our 6 hand stories. And I just went, oh, because I had raised my hand and the two guys next to me looked at me kind of funny. And I'm in that group. I'm a business development entrepreneur and I'm a technology professional. And I was like, wow, I just won first and second place in the race I don't want to win. And as a result, the root of our purpose was actually at that conference. And I want to encourage people again, there are communities right here. You don't have to be at the top. This can be both grassroots and top down. Meet with people, form small groups within the San Diego chapter. Maybe, okay, I'm going to meet with this group one time a month for 3 months, and don't set too lofty of goals, but set goals that you can do. Create the community in both smaller groups and bigger groups, and you will be surprised at the progress.
Thank you, Curtis. Michael Harth would like to know, how has being part of Conscious Capitalism driven value for your organization, and how do your employees relate to your company's association with Conscious Capitalism?
The first one is tremendous impact. The ideas that we have gotten from, I mentioned Greg Massey, but Brian Schultz is another one I'm very familiar. The number of ideas we absorb, it would be hard at this point to, I don't know, 70% of the direction we're going in is probably ideas from other conscious businesses. So it's hard to even measure being into it. And the second part of that was, how do our employees perceive it? A majority, like most, see it in a very, very positive light. But then some people get disillusioned, like with any other thing. I'm just here to work. Well, maybe, maybe not. But we promote it. We actually have goals inside of improving. We have leaders in every office. We are active. And if you're in an office where there is improving, our employees have business objectives that are tied to building the chapters around us, to finding people to give money to the cause, to getting new members to register. And I want to encourage, if you're in a position that can influence like that, set goals around the organization. Help these organizations grow, because you will get out of it what you put into it, which is like so much.
Thank you. We have a question that's from Lee, and either Alexander or Curtis, whomever would like to answer this question. How is conscious capitalism connected to or different from corporate social responsibility?
Oh, this is a good question. Curtis, do you want to take it?
It's also a hard question. It's one of the ones that most people are struggling, because they make synonymous. Oh, you're corporately socially responsible if you behave in the way that I think you should behave. And that's a very dangerous path for anybody to go down. And conscious capitalism certainly includes strong aspects of social responsibility as well. But we have to be careful about really being mindful that if we look at the true concepts of social responsibility, it usually includes very pluralistic mindsets that captures those worldviews that are not the same as our own, and accepting them for the good and the value they add. So I'm going to add to this that conscious capitalism has more in our community, the people that have those traits, and that you are going to find more socially responsible businesses in this community. But please don't get disillusioned if you find some that are not, because just like everything else, it's not how they were defining conscious capitalism. So keep heads high, don't try to understand their perspective, and don't get disillusioned if you find a few, because there are some.
Great. In the interest of time, I want to obviously respect everyone's time, and we said this was going to be an hour. So I'm going to take just one more question. And Tammy, I have a question here, and I think it's primarily for Alexander.
Sure.
And I think it's a perfect wrap up to what we've been talking about today. So Alexander, if you can tell us briefly, kind of give us the CNN version, because I know you could talk for days on this particular subject, but if you look into the future, how do you see conscious capitalism evolving? And do you see it providing additional services like helping leaders, change makers go further and partnering with organizations like B Corps and things like that? So if you could give us your quick overview on that. And I know that there's a lot of more information that we could find through our chapter and through CCI, but a quick overview would be great.
I really appreciate that question because we've gone through a lot of changes ourselves over the past year. Before COVID, conscious capitalism was reliant almost exclusively on in-person events as our way to connect individuals, to organize and to spread these ideas. And when that was no longer available to us, we were forced to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what's a different and perhaps even a better way, a more scalable way for us to build this movement and to provide that peer-to-peer support that Curtis was talking about being so important for him. And we've heard from so many others is critical to what we do. And over the course of the pandemic, we piloted and have now rolled out a new senior leader network for leaders at businesses to connect with one another, both virtually and in person when we're able to start putting in-person events on again in the future, which is getting a lot of traction. It's creating more opportunities for leaders to connect with one another, to share best practices, to learn from each other, as well as give your voice to build the conscious capitalism movement and show the diversity of how many different ways you can come at this and how many different people are a part of this amazing movement. And going forward, we intend to build that up as well as to create more avenues for other stakeholders to become more actively involved, whether that's new support structures for coaches, consultants that are working with businesses on this, for entrepreneurs, for students, that really builds on this incredible work of the leaders who have been building the conscious capitalism movement for so long. So there's a lot more that's coming down the pipeline in 2021 and in the future that really is going to lean into building that movement and that peer-to-peer support in an ongoing basis so that you know you're not alone and you're able to get support from and provide support to other conscious capitalists to make this the norm in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think that's a wonderful wrap up. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the start of this year in April and moving forward. It's just going to get better from here. So as we wrap up, again, I want to thank everybody for your time. Michael, do you have any closing thoughts or remarks that you'd like to make? And Tammy, if there's anything logistically you'd like to talk to our tribe about before we let them go, please feel free to do that. So, Michael?
Yeah, my final thoughts are first, for all of you, well, first of all, I want to thank Curtis and Alexander for jumping into the San Diego crew and helping support us, and Alexander for all your support and helping us kind of re-energize the local efforts down here. We're super excited to be closely aligned with you and to have access to great speakers and people and great minds like Curtis. And so Curtis, thank you for your time as well. Locally, I'm personally, and I think I'm surrounded by a group of people on the board who are just so excited to continue to grow our network here in San Diego, having personally been to 3 of the CEO summits in person back in Austin. I can tell you that when you create this like-minded group of people who inspire one another and challenge one another and bring out the best in one another, it's just amazing how much value we can drive as a local community to support one another, to bring these conscious capitalist ideals to light. So I encourage everybody who's local to get more involved, to reach out to Tammy. We're going to find a remarkable group of very cool local people and do some really cool stuff. And I'm just excited that we have this momentum. So I'll turn it over to you, Tammy, to wrap it up.
Sure. Well, I would like to thank Alexander and Curtis for participating today and just being so supportive as we move forward into the rest of 2021 and beyond. I'm also really excited to see the number of people that are active and participating in today's event. Thank you for that. Thank you for your energy. I've included my email, as I mentioned. Please contact me. Any information that you are looking for as it relates to the chapter, events, getting involved, donations, potential partnerships. I'm here and I will be more than happy to help answer your questions as we move forward with 2021. So thank you very much for attending today's session.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and thank you for spending the additional 5 minutes after the top of the hour so that we could wrap this up. So great to see you all. Alexander, Curtis, a special thanks to both of you. It was wonderful, tremendous information. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it, as I know I did. So with that, I will say have a great day, everyone. Act consciously and be a capitalist.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take
Thank
care.
you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Take care.